Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of CG Insurance, I'd like to welcome you to our third webinar of the Parenting Through a Pandemic series. As many of you may know, the pandemic has been considered to be a mental health crisis by many observers, and statistics have shown an increased pressure on everyone, particularly parents and their school-age children. Together with Benedict's associates, we created this webinar series to help parents and children find ways to cope and adapt to the pressures of pandemic life and how to prepare for what's ahead. In today's webinar, Parents, Mental Health, and Returning to the Post-Pandemic World, we hope you'll find some valuable takeaways to apply to your daily life. We also want to take this opportunity to thank the team at Benedict Associates for developing the series. We are very fortunate to have this group of experts to help guide us through this unique time. With that said, I'd like to introduce you to Benedict Associates organizational psychologist, Liesl Ben Wizenhout.
Thank you, Christina, for that lovely introduction. Welcome everybody to our third webinar in this series titled Parents, Mental Health, and Returning to the Post-Pandemic World. My name is Liesl, and I'm an organizational psychologist for Benedict Associates, and I'll be facilitating this webinar today. During the webinar, please use the chat functionality if you have any questions. We will also allow for questions at the end for discussions. On the agenda today, we will look at some behavioral and emotional patterns we are currently seeing as a result of lockdown and dealing with this pandemic for longer than a year. Furthermore, we will look at the current landscape supported by research, mental well-being, how to support yourself, and then returning to the post-pandemic world. To kick this webinar off, I want to use the analogy of Mount Corona, and especially to focus on coming down from Mount Corona, referring to the journey we had over the last year and a half. It's a well-known fact that even seasoned mountaineers do say that accidents occur on the way down the mountain. Descending from the mountain actually requires more skill than climbing up. And this is the metaphor I would like to use today to convey the cautious and tiptoeing nature of our exit from this pandemic, the lockdown, and how we will return to work. To equip you with information and resources so that you can get out injury-free. And while companies worldwide are planning their journey around recovering and redesigning, it's vital that we consider the shifts in the psychological landscape as a consequence of this global pandemic. Maintaining resilience, high engagement, motivation, and good mental health is crucial for us to adjust to the new normal and navigate our way to a life after the pandemic. So if we look at the current landscape, we will see that the APA has performed a study in March this year, which they warn that a second health crisis amongst parents and essential workers can happen as they are likely to report mental and physical health consequences in the long term. There's also many adults that reported undesired weight changes and an increase in drinking as a result of being unable to cope with this prolonged stress. We also see that 61% of adults reported undesired weight changes, and that can be weight gain or weight loss. We also see that 42% gained more weight than that they intended to. And those people gained an average of 29 pounds. 2 in 3 people reported changes in their sleeping patterns. And then adults also, like I said, reported drinking more alcohol to cope with the current stresses. And that's not only socially, but needing it on a day-to-day basis. We also see that 1 in 3 adults reported that they don't get sufficient sleep. And we've seen throughout this pandemic that the level of prolonged stress, grief, trauma, and isolation that we've experienced put a serious risk out there for us in terms of our mental health and our physical health and the consequences for the years to come. So if we look at mental health, we know it's a challenge, but we also know it's not a weakness. Understanding your psyche can be the key to unleashing your strengths. And while we acknowledge our mental health, we get to know ourselves better. We get to understand the authentic self, and we are better authentic people, employees, and leaders. The feelings of being out of control, coupled with uncertainty, needing to parent, needing to homeschool your kids, taking care of elderly parents, job insecurities, and economic pressures are all factors that's currently impacting on our mental health. And this is why there's a real concern for parents. And this is why we want to support you, to give you tools that you can use going forward to navigate changes as they arise. One of these tools is a model that depicts the valleys and the peaks that we've experienced. It's also very well known as the KublerRoss Model, which originally was used to explain grief and trauma. But the American Psychological Association, in association with the World Health Organization, adjusted this to explain to us what happened during the pandemic. What are those things that we experienced, and how did that look for each of us? So if you look at it, it's 5 stages. The first stage speaks to denial, the second one to anger, then the third one, resistance, fear, and then acceptance. So denial, if you think back right at the beginning, denial was that disbelief, the avoidance and confusion around what is this and the magnitude of what we were about to experience. And then for a lot of people, there was anger, frustration, irritation around their routines that was disrupted, their lives that was disrupted. And that sometimes masked itself as inner anxiety because of the fact that our routines got disrupted. The third stage is resistance, and that can be a mixture or a combination of denial coupled with anger. And that is where people refuse to adjust and they refuse to let this impact their routine. And that's a false sense of comfort because it's not possible. We need to change to be able to adapt. The fourth one is fear. A lot of people felt that inner emotion around not knowing what to expect. And when the full weight starts setting in, it's really a fear response that we see. And then lastly, we move to an acceptance stage where we start comprehending what this means and we find new ways of doing things to adjust. Now, in Bermuda specifically, with our first lockdown, and then our second one at the end of last year, and earlier this year, we saw a lot of clients boomerang from acceptance, having a new normal, to going back to that anger, resistance, and even the fear stage. So this is really a model for you to try and pinpoint where are you at and try and really understand your journey, because each of our journeys looks different. This would be different for everybody that experienced COVID to this extent. And then it's very true for us that we can have the same event, but we all can have different experiences. And with this pandemic, we saw it. Here you can see from the pictures, there's a guy that literally just couldn't anymore. There's someone that really enjoys it. There's people that celebrate it. And there's also people that had emergencies, which needed help to navigate and to get down this hill. And this is to say that the same event can have different experiences because we as humans have different reactions. And this brings us to the question that a lot of people ask, but why do some people burn out and others don't? Why do some people really, truly enjoy this period and other people couldn't survive this period? Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, but 2 major reasons is 1, resilience, and 2, self-awareness. And when you are able to identify your warning signs and you do something about it, you actually prevent the risk from falling into a burnout or a place where your mental health isn't up to standard. So talking about self-awareness, I want you to look at this picture and ask yourself, where are you on this continuum? Are you in the thriving column that says, I got this, I'm calm, I know what is expected of me, I'm able to cope, I'm consistent in my performance, I'm able to lead, focus, communicate effectively, and I have normal sleeping patterns? Or do you find yourself in the surviving one where you say that something isn't right? That's where nervousness, sadness, maybe an increase in mood fluctuations happen. There's sometimes inconsistent performance. People are more easily overwhelmed. And then also there's increased need for control, or sometimes people have difficulty adjusting to certain things. There's sleeping troubles. There's also activities or relationships which you used to enjoy that you don't enjoy anymore. And then we also have the physical response, which is muscle tension, low energy, and headaches. Perhaps you're in the struggling aspect, that says that I can't keep up with this. And that actually speaks to the persistent, the panic, the fear, the exhaustion that people actually experience. There's also sometimes where poor performance kicks in, or it's difficult to concentrate and fulfill your job requirements. It's also sometimes where people start feeling fatigue, aches and pains, where there's restlessness or disturbed sleep, and they're self-medicating. That can be either with substances or food or anything that helps you do like a numbing activity. And then lastly, perhaps you're in crisis mode and you say that I can't survive this. My warning signs are going on. And that's where we have this disabling distress, which you can't function. It's not sustainable. That's when there's panic attacks and nightmares and people are unable to fall asleep or stay asleep even. And that's really where you see these self-harm or suicidal thoughts, careless, making mistakes, withdrawal from certain situations. And that's also where there's a dependency on substances. So one thing that's important to know is that throughout your life, you will move on this continuum. You might today be at a stage, but if you realize and identify where you are today, you can implement the necessary coping skills to make sure that you transition to a more favorable state. Again, it's important to remember that different people will react differently, and that is okay. It's also important for us to look at what's the difference between stress and anxiety. Both of these are emotional responses, but stress is typically caused by an external trigger. And this trigger can be short-term, less than 3 months. It can be a work-related deadline, or it can be long-term, and that is usually where it's between 9 to 12 months. All of us have been exposed to that 12-month period, the prolonged long-term stress as a result of this pandemic. It's important to also know that the things that you need to look out for people under stress are irritability, anger, fatigue, muscle pain, digestive troubles, or difficulty sleeping. And that can be falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up very early. Anxiety, on the other hand, is when someone is experiencing this persistent, excessive worry that just doesn't go away, even in the absence of the trigger, the stress factor. And it's important to note that both stress and anxiety, their symptoms look identical. For anxiety, it may also include insomnia, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, muscle tension, and also difficulty sleeping. It's also noteworthy to know that both mild stress and mild anxiety respond well to similar coping mechanisms, which involves physical activity, a nutritious diet, and good sleep. Those three things are a good starting point if you experience stress or anxiety. But if you realize that these coping mechanisms is not helping either stress or anxiety for you, it is important that you reach out to help, to get help, either from your EAP assistance program, from the HR department, or looking for a professional that can help you with this. In terms of handling stress in a healthy way, I've put down a couple of evidence-based tools that can help you to cope in a more healthy way with stress. Deep breathing, it's a great way to reduce psychological stress. If you can close your eyes and imagine yourself in a calm and relaxing place, This is something perhaps you can do at work or at home. Identify the tension in your body. Try and identify, where is this sitting? Where is the tension allocated? And then in terms of mindfulness, it's to use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 principle. And that's basically asking yourself, what is the 5 things I see? What is the 4 things I feel? What is the 3 things I hear? 2 things I smell, and the 1 thing I taste? That is a great grounding technique to use when you start feeling anxious. If you write down 3 things that you've achieved from your day so far, this will also help you to celebrate the victories and also to be more positive in terms of your accomplishments. Body breaks is really important. So whether you're working from home, working in the office, to schedule that, perhaps a short walk during your lunchtime is really healthy habits that would help you. Speak to a professional. Take a break from news and social media. And this is really important as some people follow certain tag words or hashtags. And those constant pushing of news and the constant notifications does have an impact on your mental health. Reading news once a day to take practical steps is more than enough. Practice self-care in short increments, 15 to 30 minutes a day, and encourage your kids to participate in that, as they also need to navigate this world. Stay connected with friends and family, as this would help you with your emotional resilience and to be able to provide for your children and what they need. Keep things in perspective. Try to avoid that worst case scenario that we all do. And also perhaps trying to implement device-free activity time. That is when you as a family can perhaps prepare dinner and eat dinner together or do board games as a family without any devices, so without any TV or electronic devices involved. And this would really help your children also to have communication with you, because they are more likely to engage and talk about their emotional experiences while they are engaged in activity like that. So if we move over to the second part of this webinar, which aims to address the next topic around returning to the post-pandemic world, we see that industry leaders are predicting that hybrid work will be the next big disruption. Right, so that tool that we spoke about, the KublerRoss Model, would also help you to understand where you're at in this process. And while we can see that flexible and hybrid remote is here to stay, we cannot regard this as business as usual. This move to a different working arrangement would require us to think about our long-standing assumptions we had about the workplace. We also see that people have different reactions. We see people that really suffer from social anxiety or meeting new people. There's fear around that and anxiety that's brought on. We also see a quite popular term that was coined quite recently around social hangover, because we were in so much isolation. Now, when we start dealing with people over a weekend and see more people, you may end up feeling the next day overstimulated and exhausted. We also see that there's different approaches in Bermuda currently. There's people that return to the office full time. There's some people that is still embracing the part-time work from home, work from the office. There's also people that is adopting this hybrid approach, companies that's rolling that out. And that can also cause a lot of anxiety for people around, how will my return to a work life look? And how will my return to our normal life look after this pandemic? And that's why it's important to also check in with ourselves, because this high productivity that we've seen that a lot of companies are reporting after the 2020 year with all the employees working from home is also masking an exhausted workforce. We saw that while everybody needed to adjust with working from home, people also needed to parent, people needed to do homeschooling. There was elderly care, we had troubles with work-life balance because there was work the whole time to do at home. And that's why it's also important to note that it has its pros and its cons. So where are we? We see by a recent study that Microsoft has done that 70% of workers want to hold on to this flexible work option. We also see that there's a big percentage, 60%, that wants this in-person contact back. They want to spend time with their co-workers. 54% of people that worked from home over the past year said that they are overworked. And then 39% said that they're exhausted. And it's important to know that there's both in hybrid work, working from home and going back to the office full time, there is challenges. Returning to a life after the pandemic is full of challenges, but that's also why I want to provide you with the opportunity to check in with yourself today. If you feel anxious around returning to the office, perhaps you're still working from home, but you know there will be a day which you will need to go back to the office, or perhaps you feel anxious around what does this mean for me going forward in my personal capacity? I want you to check in with yourself, asking yourself these 4 questions. What is it that you want your day to look like? Asking yourself, when am I most productive? Am I a morning person? Am I an afternoon person? Am I really productive at home? Does it really help me? Or do I take longer to complete my activities because of distractions? It's also important to identify what is the stresses? What are those things that stresses you out at the moment? Is it perhaps role confusion, perhaps feeling out of the loop, not informed, or it's just virtual meetings and another Zoom or Teams meeting that's taking its toll? It's also important to ask yourself, how does your boss define success right now? How does good look like? And that will enable intentional conversations for us to know what is it that I need to do to be successful. And then also asking yourself, what is it that you value most? And this is the time for reflection and really start to think about what is it that you need to help you. A couple of pointers, suggestions to support you to return to a post-pandemic world. The first one would be energy management, prioritizing your energy and making sure that you know what do you need to recharge your battery. A staged approach. So a lot of us are taking some time off now in the summer, and when our children return to school, we'll again need to adjust. By having a staged approach sometimes helps us to ease into the new. Talking openly, this is now with a family member or a friend, or perhaps your line manager at work, is really to talk to them to say, this is where I'm at, and this is what I need from you to support me on my journey. Coping skills, identify a couple of coping skills that can really help you when you feel overwhelmed or nervous. And then routine. We do need routine to calmly return to a post-pandemic world. At least if you just have a framework that you know, this is more or less what I need, that will help you to decrease your anxiety. Physical readiness, that refers to physical exercise, having a nutritious diet, getting enough sleep, that would really help you with your stress management. Understanding and identifying your triggers will help you to proactively manage them. And take that coping skills that you have and manage those triggers. And then also self-care. So it's important that you look after yourself throughout the week and schedule activities that provide you with a sense of relaxation and calmness that you may require. It's also important to note that we saw in the 2020 year that a lot of people did not take vacation because they didn't want to use annual leave to stay at home. Well, that has a direct impact on your long-term motivation. So I would really encourage you to take that break, disconnect from work, and make sure that in the long term, you are able to stay motivated. And then closing thoughts around this webinar would be that through the valleys and the peaks of this journey, we learned a lot. And though we learned that we cannot control what happens, we can control how we respond to this. And there was also positive aspects that came out of this because we learned certain skills that we might use in future. It also broadened our view. Again, it's not to say that we will work like this forever going forward, but we definitely learned how our capability and resilience skills came into play. A lot of companies worldwide always wanted to try this virtual hybrid remote models, and they had the opportunity now to see what works for them and what doesn't. And then lastly, it's to say we got the opportunity to look at things differently. And some things really did change for good. So thank you so much for joining us for this third webinar. I will hand over now to Christina, which will open the question and answer session.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Liesl, that was great. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed that. Just want to open up the Q&A for any questions that may come to mind. Anything at all is welcome. I know that Liesl covered a lot of really helpful topics that probably answered a lot of your questions. I know that the topic was pretty straightforward, and I think that Liesl did a wonderful job on ticking all the boxes that even I had questions about.
I also think it's very helpful, Christina, that this is available. The recording is available on CG's YouTube channel. So although there was a lot of evidence-based tools and recommendations around it, if you want to re-watch those sections, you can get the video on their YouTube channel. That will be available. So if you want to recap any of those, that's really helpful. And yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, I just want to give a few more minutes. Should anybody have a question, no one needs to be shy here.
Yes, I did see one around asking about what do we do with anxiety around returning to the workplace. It is habit forming, right? So we all made our exit overnight from our workplace to working from home. That transition was quite hectic, but overnight we were required to work in a different way, conduct work in a different way, balance everything at the same time, right? So it only takes us about 7 to 21 times of doing something, and then it becomes a habit. So breaking a habit it's nerve-wracking, and a lot of people are feeling anxious around this. But doing a scheduled or a step-by-step approach will help you. So I'm not saying if you need to return to the office, try and set yourself up for success. Try and really see how you can position yourself to get into a routine, ease your way into it. Don't go in the first day, do a 12-hour day, have no routine, and that's setting yourself up for failure. But if you do it a stage approach and introduce things that will help you, like maybe preparing your lunch, if that was something that you really got right while you work from home, to eat nutritious meals, really try and see if you can keep those healthy habits. Take those breaks, right? Go for a walk during lunchtime and see if you can actually set yourself up to function in a new environment. And if the anxiousness really gets too much, it's also to talk to your manager and say, listen, I'm having a little bit of adjustment issues in terms of getting back into this environment, and I'll just need time to integrate a little bit longer than what another colleague may need. Mm-hmm. And that's also fine.
I think that's great. I think that also, another question came in that's really good. What are some tips you have for parents struggling with post-lockdown burnout, which I think has happened to a lot of people?
Yeah, and we see it a lot, right? So the first thing is that you're not alone. We are seeing that trend. People are fatigued. And that's why you'll see that I also mentioned it to say that the high productivity, if we reflect back, we actually never slowed down. We went from out of the office into a new environment, working from home, 100 kilometers per hour. We didn't slack at any point. Some people didn't even take vacation. So it's an exhausted workforce that we're currently dealing with. I would advise you to take some time off. So take a proper vacation and really disconnect from work. Try and refuel your battery with what you know works best for you. And then it is to create structure. Know what is expected, know your children's schedule, right? After the summer, we're going to see it again. You may feel overwhelmed again because it's going to be changed again. Putting them back into school, getting your routine up and going. And yes, there's also a lot of fear at the moment. A lot of people are asking, what's happening in the world? Do you guys think it would happen in Bermuda again? And you can see that anxiety is feeling a lot. But time off is always a good idea, especially to protect yourself from even overexhausting, like extending yourself and just going further down this exhaustion road, would be to take some time off, to really look at those basics like exercise, what's appropriate. Maybe you don't have an hour a day to spend on exercise, but what is the minimum that you can do that actually can help your mental health in terms of recharging? Is there a hobby that you can do? What are those things that really works for you quite well? I would suggest starting with those basics, eating healthy and getting enough sleep. There is a lot of concerns around the work-life balance at the moment, but I'm also seeing, and my suggestion there would be is that a lot of people, yes, there's benefits to working from home and working flexible hours, but something that we definitely lost as a result of COVID is hard stops and boundaries, right? If you closed your laptop at 6 p.m. and you left the office, people knew you were going home. And somehow working from home blurs that line completely. So a lot of people lost those hard stops, and we need to re-implement them. You need to almost like protect those boundaries and the barriers so that you can function effectively as a family, as a parent, and also to make sure that your motivation and energy levels is there where you need them to be in order to perform.
Great. I think that's yeah, I think everybody should take their holidays. And, we live in Bermuda. So, taking a week here is not like taking it in, I don't know, Middle America, Ohio. Nothing against Middle America, Ohio, but I think we are in a winning scenario for sure. Okay. I see one more question. And I think this can actually be applied to adults and children alike. Due to COVID, my child 3 has not been as socialized, and I can see her hesitation in social scenarios. What can I do to help her transition into these social scenarios when people aren't wearing masks and not participating in social distancing, which has been a part of half of her life? I think this also applies to adults too. I think adults have also been feeling the anxiety of walking into a party, and people are, and it goes against the grain of everything we've been doing for the past year and a half.
Yes, so it's like specifically those two things that I also referred to in the webinars. One is social anxiety, and the other one is people having a social hangover, right? So you must remember that if a child is just, the context is different, but if I take adults for this example, we've learned over a year, right? We've worked via Zoom, via team meetings. You could actually only concentrate on someone's face, right? So you can see expression, and that's how we worked. Now you go back to the office and you're stimulated with everything, all the body language, all the conversations, all the discussions. We are then overstimulated. You will feel more tired because your brain needs to readjust to work again with people and to take all of this information in, all of the social cues. So we see that people are anxious going into the office because they don't know. We also know a lot about each other, right? So because we invite people into our homes via these electronic tools, Christina, when I'm traveling, when I'm back, right? So you may be like, oh my word, I don't want to be near Liesel because she just came back from vacation. And those things we also know that in pre-COVID, we didn't know that much about people, but now we do. We know where people are, and we know what they roundabouts and where they go. And so that also causes a lot of anxiety for people. My suggestion around that would be is to communicate that to people. If you need to go back to the office, say to people, I'm keeping my distance. That I'm just comfortable, I'm integrating a little bit slower, I'm keeping my distance. If you go out to a social event, figure out how does the space look, if there's outside area for you to perhaps say to your friends, I would really prefer it if we sit outside, and I really prefer it if we can just like not be in the middle. So let's just be a little bit on the outside, and that's fine. Slowly we'll transgress back and be more normal, and we might feel more comfortable with it. And we also remember our social skills is a little bit adapted. You may have hugged people before the pandemic if you greeted like families or friends, and I see that some people are really uncomfortable with that as well. They don't actually know how to do it. So we need to figure that out, but we also need to be kind to ourselves and allow ourselves time to just get slowly back into it. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop there.
Okay, great. No, I think that's, I think that answered it perfectly. And I think everybody's comfort level is different. So to be expected that each person is going to react differently to these You know, because as much as it was so normal for all of us, it still feels like a new, it feels different, even though it's always something that we've always known before. Very interesting. Okay, just looking to see if there's any other questions. I think that we're actually just coming up on time as well. So, okay, well, I don't see anything else popping in. So I'm just going to wrap this up and say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Liesl. That was fantastic. Really appreciated, you know, all your tips, all your suggestions, all your recommendations. I very much enjoyed, you're right, the mountain analogy. Super, super helpful. Yeah, and I just also wanted to remind everybody that we have our last webinar. I can't believe we're at the end of our series that'll be coming up on Thursday, August 19th. We are discussing preparing for the new normal, how to help your kids feel safe and prepared as they return to school. So, you know, in the same way that we are preparing ourselves to go as adults, going back into workforces, et cetera. And, you know, we are so matured and, and adaptable. Kids, as we know, have a lot more development, and we are going to speak to that. The registration will be opening, I think, in probably a couple of weeks, probably. In this
From tomorrow, you can go up and register. Great. So long, yes.
Great. Okay. Yep. So you'll be able to pop on tomorrow, register in the same way that you registered for this webinar. And as mentioned, this will be uploaded to the CG Coral Isle YouTube channel. So with that said, thank you so much, everybody, for attending. We are so happy that we're able to put the series together. We hope you find it helpful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thanks, Christina.
Thank you, Liesl. Bye, everybody. Bye.